Once upon a time, in a small village in Owerri, there lived a young woman named Amaka. She was kind-hearted, hardworking, and full of dreams, but her family's humble background made life difficult. Her father had passed away, and her mother struggled to provide for her and her younger siblings. Amaka knew that her best chance for a better life was to move to Abuja and try to pass her university entrance exams. Amaka's uncle, who lived in Abuja, agreed to take her in. With hope in her heart, she moved to the bustling city, believing that this was the beginning of her new life. However, life in Abuja was not as Amaka had imagined. Her uncle's wife was a cruel woman who treated Amaka like a servant. She felt that beautiful Amaka would outshine her own daughter, who was same age. She was forced to do all the household chores and had little time left to study for exams. The wife's harsh treatment became unbearable over time. One day, after a misunderstanding with her cousin, her uncle's wife beat her up and called her a beggar. "You think this house is a free ride because you're family. Get out. You're a burden to this household." Her uncle could not withstand his wife's anger and watched in silence as his son and wife threw her out. Amaka was devastated, thrown out of the only home she had in Lagos. With nowhere else to turn, she wandered the streets, clutching the little money she had saved for her exams. That was when she met Ernest. Amaka was standing in the street, crying silently when Ernest approached her. He was well dressed and carried himself with the confidence of someone who knew he had options. "Hey, are you okay?" he asked, his voice smooth. Amaka hesitated but eventually shared her story. Ernest listened, appearing to be sympathetic. "You're too pretty to be treated like that," he said. "Why don't you come and stay with me for a while? You deserve better." Amaka, feeling helpless and vulnerable, accepted Ernest's offer. She thought she had found someone who cared about her, someone who would treat her kindly. At first, Ernest was charming. He showered her with compliments and made her feel special. To Amaka, he seemed like a beacon of success, someone who had already achieved what she was striving for. They started dating, but the relationship was not as fulfilling as Amaka had hoped. But soon, things began to change. As the months passed, Ernest's true colors began to show. He started belittling Amaka, reminding her constantly of her poor background and how lucky she was to be with him. "You're nothing without me," he would say. "If it wasn't for me, you'd still be on the streets." Amaka's self-esteem began to crumble under Ernest's constant criticism. He treated her like she was beneath him, making it clear that he was doing her a favor by allowing her to stay with him. Anytime she tried to talk about her dreams of going to university, Ernest would mock her. "You think you'll pass those exams? You'll never make it. Girls like you belong in the kitchen." Despite the emotional abuse, Amaka stayed, believing that Ernest would eventually come around. But one day, things took a darker turn. Ernest was planning to leave Nigeria and join his siblings in Europe. And though they were in a relationship, he often treated her as if he were doing her a favor by dating her. One day, while discussing his future plans, Ernest bluntly told Amaka, "Look, if you find someone who wants to marry you, go ahead and marry him. Because once I get abroad and become rich, I'll find the kind of woman I want." His words cut deep, but Amaka loved him. And despite his dismissive attitude, she held on to the hope that he would eventually see the value in their relationship and commit to her. But Ernest didn't change. His focus was on his future abroad, and his treatment of Amaka remained cold and condescending. Determined to take control of her future, Amaka used the little money she had saved to buy university entrance exam forms. When Ernest found out, he was furious. "How dare you waste money on this nonsense?" he shouted, his face red with anger. "You think you're going to university? Who do you think you are? You're not smart enough for that." Amaka, holding the exam forms in her hands, tried to explain that she was only trying to better herself. But Ernest wouldn't listen. In a fit of rage, he grabbed her by the arm and dragged her to the door. "Get out. You're nothing without me. Let's see how far you go without my help." Amaka, heartbroken and in tears, found herself on the streets once again, with nowhere to go and no one to turn to. As night fell, Amaka wandered the streets barefoot, carrying her exam forms and crying softly. The busy streets of Lagos felt cold and unforgiving, but Amaka didn't know where to go. She was lost in her own thoughts when a car slowed down beside her. Chidi, who had recently returned to Nigeria from the United States, was out with friends that evening. They had just finished dinner and were driving home when he noticed a young woman walking alone. Something about her caught his attention. Perhaps it was her vulnerability or the sadness in her eyes. Chidi stopped the car and approached her cautiously. "Excuse me, miss, are you okay?" he asked gently. Amaka looked up, startled, but when she saw the kindness in Chidi's eyes, she felt a sense of safety she hadn't felt in a long time. I don't have anywhere to go," she whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. Chidi listened as Amaka shared her story. Moved by her situation, he offered to help. "You don't have to walk the streets alone," he said. "I can help you." Reluctantly, Amaka accepted Chidi's offer. Unlike Ernest, Chidi treated her with kindness and respect. He didn't see her as someone beneath him. He saw her potential and admired her strength. He lodged her in a room for the night in the same hotel he was staying. And the next day, his cousin Naito, on Chidi's instruction, found her a one-bedroom apartment. Chidi paid for 1 year's rent for her. Amaka was hesitant at first, still scarred from the abuse she had suffered at the hands of Ernest. But Chidi was patient, and over time, Amaka began to trust him. Chidi quickly became a source of strength and stability for her. He saw beyond her struggles and believed in her dreams. Since Chidi couldn't stay in Nigeria long, as his business commitments required him to return to the United States, he rented a modest but comfortable apartment for Amaka to live in while they courted. They began to spend more time together, with Chidi showing her what true love and respect looked like. He admired her resilience and supported her plans for a brighter future. During one of their dates, Chidi said, "I want to meet your uncle. But let me be clear, you are not going back to live with them. I will cover your expenses while you stay here." Amaka was overwhelmed with gratitude. She had never felt so valued. Over time, their relationship deepened, and it became clear to both of them that they were meant to be together. So as their relationship progressed, Chidi made his intentions clear. He wanted to marry Amaka. He formally requested a meeting with her uncle to ask for her hand in marriage. Amaka's uncle, though initially surprised by the seriousness of Chidi's proposal, gave his blessing. Chidi requested the traditional bridal requirements to pay Amaka's dowry and complete all the traditional rites necessary to make her his wife according to Igbo customs. With excitement, Amaka watched as Chidi honored every tradition, demonstrating not just his love for her, but his respect for her culture and family. Soon, they were man and wife according to the customs and laws of their people. Even though Chidi had to return to the United States, he promised to take care of Amaka and start the process of bringing her to join him soon. Before leaving for the United States, Chidi arranged for Amaka to work at his close friend's large supermarket to keep her busy and independent while he was away. His friend Kelechi was a trusted business partner, and Chidi made sure that Kelechi and his family would check on Amaka from time to time, ensuring she was doing well in his absence. Amaka appreciated this, as it gave her a sense of responsibility and allowed her to focus on building her life while waiting for Chidi's return. Amaka embraced her new role at the supermarket, working diligently and earning the respect of Kelechi and his staff. She felt like her life was finally coming together. One day while working at the supermarket, Amaka noticed a familiar face walk through the door. It was Ernest, her ex-boyfriend. He was shocked to see her there, working in such a well-regarded establishment. In typical Ernest fashion, he didn't greet her kindly. Instead, he began berating her right there in the store. "You must have slept your way into this job," Ernest sneered, his voice dripping with malice. "Look at you. From the streets to a fancy supermarket. You think you have arrived now? You must have slept your way into this job," Ernest sneered, his voice dripping with malice. "Look at you." Amaka stood tall, something she would have never done before. The new Amaka was no longer the scared, insecure girl that Ernest had manipulated and controlled. "I got this job because I'm qualified and capable, Ernest. I don't need to explain myself to you." Ernest, still stuck in Nigeria and waiting for his visa to Europe, could hardly believe her confidence. Another day, he came back to the supermarket and tried to manipulate her into coming back to him. "You know I'll be leaving Nigeria soon. We could go back to the way things were. I'll take care of you, just like before." But Amaka was resolute. She now understood her worth, and there was no going back. "You treated me like nothing, Ernest. I'm not the girl you used to push around. I deserve better, and I found it." Unbeknownst to Ernest, Amaka was already married to Chidi according to traditional rites, and she would soon be leaving Nigeria to start a new life in the United States. Her confidence shook Ernest, and he left the supermarket, fuming but powerless. Not long after that encounter, Chidi filed Amaka's documents for her to join him in the United States. The process went smoothly, and soon she was approved for her visa. The day had finally come for her to leave Nigeria and join her husband in the US. As Amaka stood in the airport, dressed smartly and looking forward to her new life, she heard a familiar voice behind her. Turning around, she saw Ernest standing in shock. He was there to pick up his sister, who had just arrived from abroad. His eyes widened as he took in Amaka's transformation. She was no longer the vulnerable girl he once controlled. She was poised, confident, and clearly heading for something greater. "Amaka. What are you doing here?" Ernest stammered, still processing the situation. Amaka smiled calmly. "I'm leaving Nigeria, Ernest. I'm moving to the United States to be with my husband." Ernest's face paled as the realization hit him. She had not only moved on, but was leaving for a life he had dreamed of, but failed to achieve. In that moment, it was clear that everything had changed. Amaka was no longer under his thumb, and he had lost her forever. Without another word, Amaka turned and walked toward the gate, her heart filled with hope for the future and gratitude for how far she had come. Upon arriving in the United States, Amaka's life took a complete turn for the better. Chidi was not only a loving and supportive husband, but he was also committed to helping Amaka achieve her dreams. As promised, he sponsored her university education. And soon, Amaka was enrolled in a program she had once only dreamed about. With Chidi by her side, Amaka thrived. She excelled in her studies and began building a future that far surpassed anything she could have imagined back in Nigeria. She felt fulfilled, not just because of the opportunities, but because she was finally with someone who saw her potential and treated her with the love and respect she deserved. Back in Nigeria, Ernest's dreams of moving to Europe never materialized, but not in the way he had expected. Desperation had driven him to forge some documents in an attempt to secure a visa, thinking it was the only way to fast-track his journey abroad. His arrogance made him believe he was invincible, that no one would catch him. But life doesn't always go as planned. The authorities uncovered the forgery, and Ernest was not only denied the visa, but was also banned from traveling for 5 years. Now he was trapped in Nigeria, facing the consequences of his desperation. To make matters worse, even after the ban was lifted, there was no guarantee he would ever be able to convince a visa officer of his eligibility. His record was tarnished and his future uncertain. While Ernest remained stuck in Nigeria, bitter and frustrated, he began to hear whispers through mutual friends about Amaka, the woman he had once belittled and dismissed. Not only had she escaped the life he thought she was bound to, but she had also thrived in ways Ernest had never imagined. Amaka, who had once struggled to find her footing in Lagos, was now living in the United States, building the life he had always dreamed of. The woman he had underestimated and mistreated was now living the life of success, freedom, and happiness, while he was left to deal with the wreckage of his own choices. Emotional abuse is real. Earnest bullying and manipulation are forms of emotional abuse. The story shows that such abuse is damaging and that no one should have to endure it. Recognizing and escaping from toxic relationships is important. Amaka's journey shows that everyone is worthy of love and respect. No one should be made to feel inferior because of their background or circumstances. Despite being thrown out by both her uncle's wife and Ernest, Amaka's strength carried her through. She found her way to a better life because she never gave up on her dreams. Chidi's kindness and support demonstrate that a healthy relationship is built on respect, mutual understanding, and encouragement. Ernest's downfall is a reminder that how we treat others matters. His arrogance and cruelty came back to haunt him, while Amaka, who remained humble and determined, found happiness.